Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the AI Interconnect podcast, where we sit down with leaders who are reshaping industry through innovation, technology, and human centered design. And today I'm thrilled to have Stacey Schultz, president of Educate. And Stacey leads a team dedicated to helping K-12 school transform their approach to teaching and learning with coaching, professional development, and equity-focused strategy. Stacy, welcome to the show, and thanks for being here with us.
Thanks, Loren. It's so great to be here and be here with your audience as well.
Fantastic. We're very, very happy. It's going to be a nice conversation, and let's. I always love to start at the beginning. Can you share a bit about your own journey? What brought you into education in the first place, and how did that path lead you to become president of Educate?
Yeah, so my journey starts in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where I'm from. As a young person in my neighborhood, there was often a lot of violence around, which made me very curious about what are the opportunities in our community that we can do to really enhance the experience for all of us. And so there were a couple things that I did as a young person, really, to shift the environment. One was I led an effort to clean up our fields and courts, and also wrote the 76ers and asked them to replace and paint some of the backboards and such. And they did. And so we had like a grand reopening of our courts. Then additionally, I also started a peer education group on the weekends, because another issue we were seeing was a lot of teenage pregnancy. And so we had some peer education going on in the local kind of rec facility there. And so that was sort of my first entrance into education and supporting and working with a community and seeing how that really shifted things around us for all of us, really. And there was a lot more time where we were together, laughing, creating, building, playing, on the courts, and just, it was a really different vibe from what I was first seeing, which made me, really curious about the world, honestly, and how that might emulate in many different settings. And so I didn't study education, actually. I studied some other things and thought maybe I would get into politics. And in an ideological way, thought that was the way you serve people. And what I want to say is I do believe many people who get into that line of work are in it initially for public service, and some people stay in that lane. But what I notice is that's not always what happens. And so I didn't go that route, really. And I was like, okay, back to the drawing table. Now what? And I just remembered how much I loved working with young people, even when I was a peer myself. And so that led me into the classroom and working initially with students with they were labeled severely emotionally disturbed. Many of them were out of prison and mental institutions, and just really working to create an environment where the students felt heard and seen, and shifting recidivism really is kind of my beginning journey, formal journey as an educator. Fast forward, because I could go on forever about my educational journey, but fast forward a little bit, having children, finding different paths that really allowed me to be the working mother that I wanted to be. And I say working mother because both roles were equally important to me. And at the time, fulfilling how I could be the mother I wanted to be and also have a career that I wanted to have. And so I don't really mean that they're both equally important, but it was equally important for me to figure out how to make them work really together. And so I really found myself on a path of of where will this lead. I got to travel the country, work with school districts around the country, creating more inclusive environments. I had the opportunity to work with many leaders in different programs and building their capabilities. And then around having my third child, I was like, hey, what now? Right? And I needed to stop traveling, which led me to educate. And the two founders were at a pivotal point. They wanted to enhance their impact. And at the time, they were kind of just bringing tech into the classroom. And they were like, we need to shift this. We are losing people left and right in our work. We're not having the impact we want to have, and we need to shift it. And so I felt like that was an exciting opportunity to go into a business, my first for-profit role, and really look at, learn business, first of all, and then also really look at how do we create an organization of impact.
I love it. This is great. It must be a resting and vacation when you come home with your 3 kids, even if you had 10 of them. Wow, this is I believe you went through many things. I love hearing how this story evolved, and you mentioned the origin, needs, and the gap you saw that led you to educate mission. What did you want to do differently from other educational consultancies, if I can say?
Oh, that's a really great question. I think one of the things that we really do differently is we want to be at the point of instruction. So a lot of times educational consultants kind of come in, they support with the strategy, they do some coaching, right? They give a product or a way, but we really wanted to come in and partner right in the classroom. Like, what's the opportunity to support the teachers, the adults in the community, and the family, the leaders, but being really side by side with them to really support them in these shifts that needed to be made. So the coaching still happening, the strategy still happening, but what felt really different to me is like, hey, we're gonna get in the dirt with you, right? Like we're gonna do this for real and roll up our sleeves and be with you side by side.
Okay, then I'll go a little bit deeper. Educate's focus is on equity, innovation, and, as you say, coaching standouts. Could you talk a bit about how you work with schools day to day? What does that partnership actually looks like?
Yeah, so I think, what's really interesting, right, as AI, and I know we're going to probably get more into AI as we go, but as AI entered the scene many years ago, really, right, we really began to look at what is the impact of technology in classrooms. How could it be more impactful? And one of the things we used to always say, right, at the beginning when there were smart boards coming in the room, we don't want it to be a glorified chalkboard or bulletin board, right? When machine learning came in the classroom, we don't want it to be busy work for students, like a glorified worksheet, right? So we're constantly asking ourselves as we partner with schools, okay, as the tools to educate students are changing, how do we want to think differently then about what capabilities it opens up for us? So that's one of the things we've always thought about is, as we understand more and more about teaching and learning, whether that's, cognitively, right, through cognitive science, or whether that's through technological tool advancement, how does that shift the opportunity in the classroom? So we always like to go back, like, what's most important here, right? What is most human about being in a shared space with 20, 30, 35 kids and adults, right? What's most human about that? What's most important about that? Let's start there and then see, okay, how do the tools and such help support that teaching and learning really meaningfully and potentially enhance the aspects of what's really important about being in a shared space together as humans. And so I think that's the piece that we're constantly asking ourselves, no matter the new technology that comes in the room, no matter the new research that comes in the room. It's like, how do we leverage these new findings and understandings to really continue to enhance this human element, which is so important to teaching and learning?
Fair enough. I love it. You describe coaching models and embedded PD, leadership training, things like this, and that must be powerful. I know you work a lot on culturally responsive teaching, differentiating for students, and building through community. How do you help school leaders and teachers move beyond the buzzword into real sustainable change?
Yeah, so I think that a lot of it starts with, and this is not something people haven't heard, right? But a lot of it comes to mindset and really supporting the teachers and other staff community. Well, first, actually, I want to back up a little bit. First, it's about understanding the current mindset of the people you're working with, right? So that includes the families, that includes the students and the teachers. So what's important to them about being here? What are they trying to get out of this experience, right? What's important when they leave this experience to continue on their journey? And so I think, starting there and really trying to gain an understanding of where is your community now and what are they afraid of? What are they fearful of? And then, so then we talk about, let's create a North Star together. Okay, if this is what we want, but here are some of our fears, where do we really want to try to get to? If we're looking 10, 15, 20 years down the road, and sometimes that's really hard, but it's like that why of the situation, right? What are we really here to do as a community? And put that why up there, and then we start kind of planning backwards. What systems need to be in place? What vicious cycles do we need to break as a community, right? And some of that is like learning, but some of it's also unlearning. And then it's, what do we need to feel safe to make these changes, to take these risks? And how do we ensure those things are in place so that that can happen? And I think some of that really does come down to sitting with people and hearing, where are those fears coming from? And it's kind of amazing, right? And here comes the coaching pieces, right? Of really diving into those emotional cycles, or where in their past they're kind of hung up on something that maybe they learned at some point, or they never really examined before, right? And so all of those pieces need to be surfaced to really deeply examine so that you can move past that. Because real change, right, takes work. It takes work, and it's about it needs to be commitment. There needs to be new habit building, rituals within a school building, right? Systems in place, as we already talked about, to really support all of that. And I think, sometimes just knowing that can make people feel like, oh my God, I don't want to do it. Right? It's like too much. It's too much. But I think what I like to offer people when I go in, and this is a small example of when I would coach in the classroom myself, is, okay, do you know that you're spending X amount of minutes redirecting the class right now? What if I told you, by putting some time up front and making some shifts, you could gain most of those minutes back over the rest of the year? right? An exponential amount of minutes back to your instructional time. And when I tell people that and show them that, they're like, oh, I want that, right? Like, and I also don't want to be consistently redirecting, right? So how can I be proactive, right, versus reactive? But when you can show people like that really tangible shift that can happen with these changes, and then they start to happen, it really does create that buy-in from people like, okay, so I do have to do the work up front, but that's going to mean really meaningful shifts as I go and over time.
I love that answer. Let's talk about the broader K-12 landscape and for a second. And from your vantage points, what are the biggest or the big shifts you're seeing in education right now? Trend, policy.
There's so many. I'm pausing, Laurent, because pick one. Well, let's stick with AI because that's part of what you focus on, right? And part of why you were really curious about doing this podcast and having these conversations. I think the trend that we're seeing, right, and you're quickly seeing shifts. Initially, right, when generative AI came out, you would see more students were engaging with it than teachers. I think now, I don't know the exact statistics, but I can say, at least from being on the ground and being with schools and leaders and teachers, that there are more teachers utilizing it for various things, right, for their classroom. And Educate, we created also our own AI product with educators, actually. And so we're actually also supporting teachers in leveraging AI really meaningfully. I think, to me, this shift of leveraging AI meaningfully in the classroom can open up a world of possibilities. Education systems are known to move very slow. So my hope is that we don't miss the mark, so to speak, right? That we can, as an educational community, take up the torch and say, this can shift things up in a real way that allows us to think differently, that allows us to remodel education. Now, that's a lot to ask, and governments are often involved in education systems as well. And so now you're asking two systems that I would say move very slowly to move a little fast and put some things in place to allow these really big shifts to happen. So if I had a magic wand, what I would maybe invite, just thinking about the human element here and such, is why not open it up to people to apply for if they're interested in creating a new model. Open it up for those people, give them the resources they need, and allow them to kind of create an experiment with the community that trying new things out in the school setting. I think that could be a really interesting way to start the transition of reimagining what school looks like. And this isn't necessarily new, this idea of design and opening applications and such, but I would like to open applications within the system. Like, where are the schools, where are the pocket schools of innovation that are already trying new things that maybe want to get out in the forefront of this, so that we can show that within the current limitations how these shifts and changes can happen. I think a lot of times when we see these kinds of disruptions, they like to make these changes outside of the system, which often make it hard for those within the system to adapt it. And so, because they often point to, well, you didn't have this or you didn't have that, and so how do we there's a lot of different efforts around this. They're just lacking, in my opinion, Laurent. And sometimes I think it's like the expectation is too small, and these shifts are too small. Like, we need to be thinking big. And we need to get those, like find those spaces that people are really curious and want to engage deeply in this. Because before we know it, we're going to blink and we're going to say, oh, everything has changed. Now what? And I don't want us to be in that space. I want us to be in the space of things are changing fast and we're trying things to figure out what needs to happen for education.
Yeah, right. But moving education is not a fast process. Never been. And of course, as you say, AI is top of mind everywhere. And as you mentioned, you've got Educate AI Coach and something called Roadmap Services, or it's together. Then how do you see AI changing classroom practice, and what are the real challenges in your district face in adopting it well? You could be wanting to rush it and go faster, but unfortunately, there is other variable that comes in mind.
Yeah, so we have a tool. It's actually called Unlock AI, and yeah, we have some roadmap tools for, to your point as we were speaking, right? What does change take? So we have a roadmap of AI pathway, essentially, of supporting a school community and adapting AI meaningfully into their community, really, from families to students and teachers and leaders, etc. Like, what does this look like on a high strategic level and an ethical level? Thinking of safety as well, because that's really important, and we're all about ethics and safety when it comes to AI. We're also about educating on the limits and downfalls of AI, but not allowing that to stop us from engaging with it, right? But you need to be mindful of where are the limits and downfalls of AI, that we don't want to fall into those traps, so to speak, right? So I think, Laura, when you first asked me this question, I always go to my dreamy place, what would this really look like? What could it look like? And schools I feel like they're cyclical in their what they mean to a community and society. But often, right, schools are a community hub, right? Families in a community often gather around schools, whether it's events, right? Whether it's that you just have this shared, this is where you send your children kind of thing, right? Schools are, in some essence, and have always been a community hub. And the way that has manifested throughout history has definitely shifted and cycled in and out again and such. But I think it's going to be really imperative that schools remain as a community hub to keep us connected as humans, even, down to that route of, we, in our current iteration of a human species, do require connection, right, to really function. And shared purpose even. So if we require that in this current, and I say this current because there's some interesting research, right, about how technology might evolve. And evolve sounds wrong to me, and some of the way they're pointing to how we might shift, but how the human species might change over time because of all these technological advancements. But in this current iteration, and we, I think, need to decide as a human species, well, do we want this to happen to us, or do we want to lay the groundwork and roadwork for what we want humanity to be? And my hope is that schools will rally around that. What do we want teaching and learning to be about? And what do we want this community center to be about? So my hope is that we leverage AI as an opportunity, right, for kids to engage, for them to design, for them to think, and what we know to be true right now is cognitive engagement and cognitive activity is seemingly decreasing a little with the AI engagement. So we want to keep that up, right? So how do we think about that? How do we get more creative with the assignments and the projects and the tasks we're asking students to engage with? How do we push their thinking? And so we need to do all of that, right? And then when kids come together, so my thinking is like, you're doing like almost this like research. You have at your fingertips this amazing like partner, right? Your AI partner, and you're able to really dive into things. And then you come into your community, into your school with others, and you kind of challenge each other, right? You ask each other questions. You challenge each other on something. You try to delve into a deep dive of something. Maybe you then invite your AI partner back in. Maybe you don't. Maybe you do that later, right? Maybe, and that to me, and then also does it allow space and time for teachers to really build deeper relationships, which is so key, right, with students. Because if some of this information sharing, which unfortunately is what a lot of schooling has been about, is taken off the shoulders of the teachers, then what, right? Teachers get to be there to really be like a facilitator, a coach, challenging students, supporting them, getting to know them better, reaching them on different levels, right? And so to me, that's like where I go of what's the closest next iteration of school, and then how does it even get closer to like what is a career trajectory is something else I like to think about. Like how does that get more enmeshed in the work? How are students then more empowered to kind of go out and work in different career settings because they're a little more potentially further along, right, in the information that they have and know, and their ability to kind of collaborate and create together. So that's my dreamy thing. I think school is stuck because, well, not just because, but one reason I think schools are stuck is because a lot of teachers are thinking about how did I learn? What did it look like for me? And so it's hard because a lot of times educators, teachers, leaders, etc., aren't given space to just step away from that and rethink it, right? Rethink what is education? What could it have looked like for them? What might have been more supportive? But then also like, what is something we didn't dream? What can we dream about school being? And how do you dream with the kids, right? And really rethink this together. And I think that still remains to be a problem, is that there's not enough space created in a school for people to reflect, for people to consider, for people to dream. And so I think that remains a barrier even when we think about AI, because when we go into, K-12 overall, something you still hear is there's not enough policies, there's not enough direction, there's not enough guardrails. And those are the things that a lot of people ask for to be able to like dream within or think within. And so then instead of having this cohesive strategy or approach, even if you're just saying, hey, everyone go out and use it, and then we're going to come together and see how are we using it, how's it functional, how's it not. I mean, those things are happening at a small degree, and these things really need to be happening more often, and there needs to be a shared like vision as to like how this is going to happen. And I think that's one of the biggest and a big roadblock really, is that there isn't that, and people are doing it on their own, in their own pockets, maybe talking about it. And when they're talking about it, it's often about a product, which kind of misses the point, right? And not how does AI fit in this scheme of teaching and learning, and what does that mean about how teaching and learning changes?
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, you explain your AI vision, basically, and that leads nicely into my favorite question. But it's what's the hardest part? And you answered a little bit, of course. And I'm always asking twice or three times the same thing, but but I get different answers or detailed answers. Then, what's the hardest part about helping school actually make these changes, and where do you think where do things get stuck? You mentioned it also before.
Yeah, I definitely mentioned before some of the mindset, the opportunity to really get people to step back and discuss, where are they feeling fear, right? What are they not trying? I think about making space, right? This has always been something for me personally as like a leader and a human. Like, what does it mean to create environment and space that allows people to really thrive and to create just emergent, abundant community? And I think about that even from when I was sharing the story of, okay, there's a lot of violence, but really what can our community do? What would help alleviate some of that? Creating a space where we can be together in a productive, positive way, right? Through, even if it is trash talking on a court, but it's different than, the violence. And I think to me, that is just so important and so missed and sometimes very performative. Like, we'll create the space and we'll listen, but we don't really act on it. And therefore it becomes like you're perpetuating a cycle of distrust, right? Of like, well, but I told you what I need and want, and nothing is happening. Nothing is changing, right? And we see this so many times, even in our like political elections, right? You hear that a lot. Like, people swing because they feel like, oh, nothing's happening. So what about, we'll try it this way or we'll try it that way. And instead of cohesively coming together to say, okay, what is it we really want? What's that pathway? What is that going to mean and look like? What do you need to be on this pathway? Right? And I think that's a question that's missed. What do you need? I love this question. It comes up a lot for me and a lot of different things I read and listen to, but how can I more generously serve myself and others? Right? And there's that idea of, I love that idea because I so often in the past have left myself out of the equation. But I think many of us need to ask that question, especially for those of us who are out there really serving others and remembering we can only serve others as well as we serve ourselves, right? And so how do we create that abundance and generosity together? And that creates real like community and collective action and so I think schools have not been set up about that a lot of times. There's a lot of like compliance. There's a lot of I personally find accountability really important, but I think the accountability that happens in schools is mismatched to what is really fair, so to speak, right? And in the US, we have standardized testing as a form of accountability, but those standardized testing are problematic, right? There's different problems with some of those standardized tests, and therefore, are you getting a real capture of where students are really at and what they're really able to do? No, and then you hinge everything on this. Right. And so how that to me is a problematic accountability measure because it's not really aligned to measuring the true impact, but also understanding the true needs of students. And so I think those are some of the bigger barriers of how do we create, spaces that are real opportunities to hear one another, see one another, create together really meaningfully, have a shared vision, have accountability to each other, because I do believe that's a real part of collective action and collective impact that we need to all be ushering with each other as the times continue to change. And there's going to be there's always uncertainty, but there is this like, where is this going, right? As this technology continues to come in, life, work, humanity will change. Like, that is happening. It is happening. And I know we can rest assured on ourselves that that always happens anyway, but this is poised to happen more exponentially than any other, right, change in humanity. At least, everything I read talks about even just the adoption period of AI has been much quicker than other things, right? So I think this is something we really need to be mindful of is, okay, how do we then we need to create these safe spaces to really be heard and seen and to care for one another and ourselves. And what does that all look like is something a little different than what schools have been doing, even though I do believe that's what they want to be doing.
That's very interesting. Let's get to business challenges. What has been the biggest challenges you are facing growing Educate itself, and whether that's scaling your coach model or finding the right partners? I think there's something, and or making the business sustainable.
Yeah, so
all of the above.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll start with finding the right partners because, as you know, Laurent, we were acquired, Educate was acquired back in November by a change management organization. So it's funny, a lot of people are like, a change management, how's that fit? But as I talk through this conversation, I'm sure you can see how that fit really well. But they're also, so it's Change Force, and they are change management, tech-enabled change management organization. So they have leveraged technology throughout their existence to really support different change management. For us, that felt like such a strong partner because we believe change management mindset is very important in education, in a system to transform, particularly at this moment in time. And we also have that AI product that we have been creating and cultivating with our partners, with our schools, and we need to take it to the next level. And we don't really have those capabilities. So we were able to find a partner who does have those capabilities and understands building those products and continuing to evolve them over time to meet the needs of users and such. And so we're really, really excited about that partnership because it just enhances our capabilities, and there's a deep alignment in philosophy of how do you approach and work with schools in our case, but in their case, clients, And so I think one of the harder parts too about scaling, one time I was at a conference, and actually one teacher came up to me and she was like, my gosh, the work you all do is so amazing, blah, blah, blah. You don't share it enough. You don't share it enough. And she's like, and I know that's true of all people who are doing good work. They don't share it enough. And I said, well, yeah, you're just too busy doing the work, right? You're doing the work. You're out there in the field. You're with clients. You're with, the team. You're enhancing the output, the quality, the impact, etc. And I think that's very true. That has been really hard for us is how do you, and we've been trying to flex our muscles in that. And another good reason to have this partnership because they have like a storytelling mechanism that's stronger than ours. And so we're hoping to learn from how do we pause and tell this story better and more, right? Because there's a lot of really amazing things that have happened in our work and partners with schools that we want to be able to share more. And it really has hindered our ability, right, at the same time to scale because we're very focused on that. But the other question you asked is around scaling is it about the coaches? And what I want to say is at the beginning, yes, we had to figure out how do we get all the coaches on board? Also, how do we diversify our services so we're not scaling at a one-to-one? Meaning one school join, we need another coach. One school join, and we need another coach. So we worked on really diversifying meaningful services to meet the needs of our schools so that it's not a one-to-one journey anymore. Additionally, having really strong onboarding to ensure that when a coach joins, that they know what this organization is about, and they also know how to contribute to the organization to help build and grow it. And so that we've spent a lot of time and energy, and we're super excited to say, like, our community, and I would say we've always been remote because our people are out, right? They're out with clients every day. And so we've always had the remote challenge, so to speak, of how do you really build a community and culture when you're not working physically together every day. And so that we've really found some mechanisms that support that in a big way and have created a really powerful and meaningful culture where our coaches and our work are really fantastic.
Yeah, that's right. I think a lot of listeners will appreciate hearing that. It's so easy to see the polished outcome and forget the messy process underneath.
Oh my gosh, yes. Sometimes I think it's because you want to forget, right, Lauren? You're like, oh my gosh. But it is so important to remember, yeah.
Yeah, that's out of all this. And how about for the school you served, what the single hardest barrier, we talked about that a little bit, are they trying to overcome right now when it comes to equity and innovation basically?
So everyone kind of talks about it differently, but I think the single thing that all schools are really trying to do is ensure that all of their students are engaged and growing. And I think it's hard to put your finger point on like the one thing in each community that is a barrier to that, because I think every community has various barriers to figuring that out. I mean, in some communities, it's still, I think when you're tool first in a community, and I mean curriculum as being a tool too. So when you're tool first, I think that's a barrier because you're not really understanding who are the kids in front of you and where their barriers to those tools might be and what other needs they might have, right? And so then it becomes a Band-Aid approach to how are you supporting the students. And we know how that all kind of happens, right? Where you start just putting this here and this here and this here and this here, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, but it's still not working. And it might help some kids, right? But it doesn't help them all. I mean, so that's definitely one thing where we still see and hear. And I would say, AI curriculum, any of those things really go in that bucket. When you're trying to say, okay, we need to do all these things, sometimes you miss out on what are the pieces and practices that support the students, right, in the building. I think for other schools, right, who might have different kind of flow and are starting with the students first, I really do think they are considering, well, what are we preparing our students for? What's next for them, and how do we best do that? How do we get them interested in that, right? Because they're kids, right? It's hard at that developmental age to really get kids, and I'm talking teenagers, young people, right? To say, and on a wide scale, like, hey, you need to be thinking about your future here. It's like, wait a minute, I'm just 16. I want to be thinking about right now, which is fair, right? So finding a way that it relates to students, even if you're offering these amazing different pathways and kids are taking advantage, but we're hearing like, oh, but they don't necessarily finish it all the way through, or they change around, and the thing that I want us all to be like cautious of is pushing a kid too much into a path, because realistically they're not going to be on one path anymore, right? Like, that's just not how it's going to work. So how do we support students actually and embrace really where they're at developmentally, and help them be agile and explore these things with guidance, right, in a really meaningful way. And I think we get too caught up in ourselves almost, right, in the most beautiful way, and wanting to be very helpful, right, and like, oh, it would be really great if you got this certificate at the end or whatever it might be. But it's like, well, yes, and what else is there, and how can we help the students navigate what might be ahead, right? How do we give them this opportunity to explore with support, right? And I think that's my caution here, is like, for those schools out there doing those really cool things and helping students get those pathways, I think a yes end here. How can we also help and honor where they are developmentally to explore and be agile, because they're going to need that actually through their adulthood.
Yeah, definitely. Hard work, big challenges, and okay, let's end on a future-looking note. When you think about 2025 and beyond, what's your vision for K-12 education and educate, and what will success look like for you?
So it feels two different things. So let's, I know I talked a little bit about K-12 education, this idea of really shaking up what does the education look like by leveraging really some of the things I talked about are different practices that have been around, right? Flipped classroom, project-based learning, real world practice, right? Some of those things, but how does that look different? And how do we leverage schools as community centers so we're not just focused on getting through instruction, but we're focused on building a whole person and leveraging that community in a way to do that. And I think we really can do that when we start to think differently about these new capabilities that are out there with AI. Another caution I like to say too is we cannot stop creating. We need to be creating as humans, or our sort of what we have created is like plateaued, right? Because then it's like the AI is only as good as what we are creating as humans and able to continue to foster and develop, right? And so we want to continue to do that. We want to create more space for art and exploration, and so I have a real hope for that it becomes a more agile community based space where we're focusing on the whole person. That's my hope for beyond, and how that really supports them in the life they want to lead. And so I think some of that will be tricky to navigate, and students will need new skills, right? Because there's going to be things very unwritten. And so how do we continue to help foster that by bringing in different experts from different fields and leveraging AI, as I mentioned. So there's a lot of really, to me, cool possibilities out there, really interesting, really resetting the bar, so to speak, but also leveraging those really strong foundations that makes a school a community pillar, right? And leveraging that too. So a lot of things to pull from, and explore and continue to flourish is something I would love to see in K-12. For Educate, I see us, especially in our new partnership with Changeforce, as helping to bridge the gap of what does it look like from pre-K through workforce upskilling. What does it really look like to be agile, bring different transformation, solutions, partnership, strategy, etc. throughout this full human development journey? And I think being a partner with Changeforce really allows us to consider the spectrum more deeply, because the rest of Changeforce organization is embedded with employers. And so we're embedded in that work of upskilling and supporting those agile shifts. And so I think it allows us to have a real clear purview of like, where is this going for real, right? On the ground, in the organizations. And what does that mean then for, education and opportunity? But I also don't want that to define us, right? Because work, even though I know I started out talking about being a working mom and a mother, were both very important to me, but work isn't our identity, right? So who are we beyond that? And how do we make space for people to really acknowledge that and build that and bring that into these different spaces in beautiful ways if they want, and of course having the boundaries that they want as well. So I think there's this partnership that we now have, Educate and Change Force, allows us to operate in a different spectrum.
Meaning a bigger goal you're working towards, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. A bigger goal that we're working towards, a more, I would say, aligned and enhanced goal too, right? Because as Educate, just being pre-K to 12, while we're keeping our fingertips on higher education and technology and different career and where the workplace is going, we're always interested in where workplace, community, etc. is going, society is going, right? Now, we don't just have to keep our pulse on it, we're in it. We're in those different spaces now as well. And so it allows us to have a more comprehensive view and allows us to bring enhanced insights to the work that we're doing, both from a community employer kind of lens to a K-12 lens as well. So I feel like there's like a beautiful intersection here of insights that allows us to operate in a more strategic partnership way, that we can bring things to the table that not a lot of people can really bring with the various different expertise that are within the organization.
That's great. I love it, Stacey. This has been a great, thoughtful, insightful conversation. I really appreciate you sharing your story, your mission, your perspective of the future of education, and the new goal of Educate, obviously. And thank you so much. And for listener who want to learn about you, Stacey, and Educate, where can they connect?
Yeah, LinkedIn. I'm not really on social media aside from LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is definitely a great place to go, and you can find me at Stacey Schultz. I also do have my own podcast, Educate US, on Leon Media Network. No, it's okay. And in March of 2026, my co-author and I will have our book hitting the stands. And so hopefully those are some ways that you can continue to follow me and the organization.
That's wonderful. I love it. And I can't wait to see that, hear that. And Stacey, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And that's it for today's episode of AI Interconnect. And if you enjoyed it, share it with someone who's building the future, or better yet, someone who should be. And until next time, stay curious, stay creative, and keep building. Thank you, Stacey.